welcome to another hour with Cyberwatch and the usual suspects. You have Vlad, Andrew, and Scott here to take all your questions at 844-790-TALK, 844-790-8255. And we're going to jump right into the cyber news. Andrew, you're live, so take it away.
I'm here live here in Washington, D.C., or actually Baltimore, Maryland, at the Defensive Cyber Operations Symposium. So I'm here with Spirent Federal and all the other big agencies here in the region. And so it's really exciting. We're getting to listen to all the challenges and hopes and things that we're doing to maintain our critical infrastructure and to support the warfighter and to support our industries. So that's where I'm here. I'm Andrew Strutt. And let's see, the first thing that I wanted to talk about is there's an interesting story that's been rolling on for a while. Mudge, Peter Zydeco from DARPA, who used to run the Cyber Fast Track, started tweeting about this today, and I've been following this a bit. And it's basically Guardian screw up on inaccurate reporting regarding vulnerabilities and calling it a backdoor and creating a bunch of drama. So the interesting part is that there's been a lot of feedback given back to the Guardian from legitimate security researchers, and they built a timeline that shows when the Guardian pushed their articles and whatnot, and it was mostly that they did it for drama and for the hoopla. And then later on, here it is. So this started in January 13th, and here all the way to June 13th, 5 months after the initial story, they have not redacted or retracted any of the story or fixed it. And so it's very interesting. There's a timeline and whatnot, and I can provide some more information on it. But that's something I just wanted to bring up, that some of the news out there regarding information security or cyber isn't necessarily accurate. And it's done for ratings or it's done for hits. And the drama and the hoopla, but it isn't necessarily accurate, and it creates issues where without accurate reporting on this stuff, we cannot accurately fix this stuff. So Vlad and Scott may have some more to that, but I wanted to lead into it with that story. It was one of the most recent ones that I saw, and so that's some of the thoughts on that.
Well, inaccurate reporting on cyber security and privacy and other issues in computers is not new, and that's kind of why we're here.
Right.
So I remember locally here in Las Vegas, we had a story talking about you scan your driver's license now when you leave a parking lot at some of the hotels, because if you have a local driver's license, you park for free. And people began asking, well, what about all that data they're collecting from the driver's licenses?
Right.
And of course, they asked the head of parking, and he goes, oh, we don't collect that data. And it's like, well, there's no way to scan it, and you have to compare it to something,
right,
to let people, you have to be collecting it somewhere. But they don't ask the computer people about it. They ask the head of parking, and of course, he's like, oh, no, we don't keep a copy.
Yeah. He's just going to tell you what you want to hear so that you'll leave him alone and so on.
Yeah.
But in January, The Guardian wrote a series of false stories about WhatsApp that it will now neither stand behind or retract. As a result of these stories, which remains up on the Guardian side, activists in vulnerable places have put themselves at risk by moving from a secure WhatsApp messaging to a very insecure SMS. So basically what's happened is that they put out these false stories, and it's created risk. It's created vulnerability for these types of people, such as activists or journalists and so on. So it's what they're saying is that it's not a failure of journalism, that it's a failure of the Guardian being backdoored. And what caught my attention was when Peter Zydeco said, when Mudge said that they are the adversary now. So that's what caught my attention. I was like, who's the adversary? And then when I read the article from the Guardian, I was like, oh yes. And then I read the whole timeline from January this year to now, and yeah, it's quite disturbing. So Vlad may have something more to say on that.
So if a backdoor is hidden well enough and sophisticated enough, if a vulnerability is hidden well enough and sophisticated enough, you could potentially hide the backdoor that way to make it look innocent. If you've ever looked at the obfuscated C programming contest, people have come up with some pretty ingenious ways to hide malicious code in their legitimate human code. So a vulnerability could potentially be a backdoor, unless you actually know the developer and know that there were no motives behind that vulnerability being left behind. It actually could be a backdoor. but that requires evidence.
Right, absolutely, and you're absolutely correct, and I agree completely. The interesting part is through the timeline, they show other security researchers who evaluated the issues and gave matter-of-fact reports on it and showed that it wasn't actually a backdoor. Yes, there's a vulnerability, and yes, they fixed it, but it still pushed a lot of people from a secure mechanism to be using an insecure method. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to call in 844-790-TALK, 8255.
All right, so let's go on to the next story. I happen to have one that will start before the break, and that is, we've all heard of copyright trolls. And we've complained about them, and they're a fact of life in the tech industry. But now copyright trolls are moving to houses. They actually, people now trolling neighborhoods, looking for houses that look too similar to ones that architects have built, and claiming copyright violations on their plans. And so we have a new low in copyright trolls. Any comments, Vlad, Andrew?
Funny, I bet he has a lot more interesting things to say on this subject.
So I actually read about the story before, and it's really interesting. Even though there's a lot of house design plans that they get reused, each one is actually unique. Right now I'm very familiar with this because I'm actually about to put up a building. So even though the building design exists and I'm approving the building design, I actually have to pay for a new architecture drawing to be approved by the county, and to have the design be slightly modified to be approved by local codes. So a building looking a particular way on the outside likely won't hold water unless it's something really, really unique. But some of the internal features, or if somebody actually gets their hands on the actual architecture drawings, they actually might have a point, unfortunately.
Yeah, here in Las Vegas, you can't get a lot of the plans because the county says, oh, they're copyrighted, we can't give them to you. And it's like, well, how can you tell if the plans meet the code? How can anyone do an independent evaluation if you can't get the plans?
Well, you as a person may not be able to, but you can get.
Go ahead, Vlad.
I said you as an individual may not be able to get the copy of the plans, but perhaps an officer of the court or somebody with a subpoena should be able to get a copy of those plans. That's
true. All right, we'll talk more about this after the break. Remember, you can call us at 844-790-TALK, 844-790-8255. All right, welcome back. 844-790-TALK, 844-790-8255. This is Cyberwatch with the usual suspects and making a mistake in the studio. And right now we have Larry with us on the phone. Well, Larry, what's your question?
So it seems like you guys have a pretty in-depth understanding of all these cyber threats and stuff like that. So I was just wondering what you guys' group opinion was on the Wannacry stuff and whether or not that was a false flag by state sponsorship in order to try to attribute U.S. capabilities to something else, or what do you think the true story behind the Wannacry exposure was? Do you think it was a random act, or do you think it was a calculated attempt at something larger?
Excellent question, Larry. You want to take this, Vlad, as our resident ransomware expert?
So right now we actually don't have enough evidence to say either way. Some credible sources have said that there's sufficient evidence to point at North Korea, but I have not seen anything definitive. I don't think Wannacry was a strike in and of itself. I think it was kind of a trial run to see what could be done in the future. There's plenty of other vulnerabilities that are just as serious or actually even more serious that can be exploited. But I do think it was a pretty effective trial run. And even if this was not done by nation state, you can be sure that actors working for nation states all over the world actually are paying attention to how well it worked and what was done to stop it and what the responses were from different countries and different entities.
Well, I agree with you, Vlad, that attribution is a very tricky subject and very difficult to obtain. But it's going just with the trends, with all the attacks on in the media against the United States and its interests and whatnot. I would go a little bit, myself, in my opinion, would go a little bit further and say that it was directed at us, that it was a more sophisticated intent beyond just the actual craft that did it. So that's my opinion on it. What do you think, Scott?
Well, I think I'm going to agree with both of you because I don't have anything to add in this particular case. Vlad covered it pretty well, and Larry, what is your opinion on this since you brought up the subject?
So I'm going to offer a plot twist. Dun, dun, dun. So what if it was I don't want to say sponsor state, but it was an organized group that was attempting to template or create a pattern, if you will, of known exploitable platforms and then map that out. So essentially, the Eternal Clue or whatever it was called, exploit was on a certain platform. So maybe there's something else that ties into it that hasn't been patched. So they could have possibly been networking possible targets, if it's possible, like 30 times, in the future to create a target deck. I don't know, though. I'm not a cyber expert like you guys.
Okay.
Point. That's definitely good feedback. We really appreciate the call. If you have any other topics that you'd like to bring up with us, feel free to call anytime. 844-790-TALK, 8255. Thanks for calling, Larry.
All right, Vlad, you haven't given us a story yet today.
Yes, so my top story right now is actually that Verizon completes acquisition of Yahoo, and our favorite CEO has been asked to resign. So our favorite CEO has a $23 million parachute, and now that Verizon has taken over Yahoo, maybe that can actually start securing some of their assets, and maybe some of the woes that Yahoo has faced over the past few years will hopefully come to an end.
Where do you see Yahoo a year down the road?
Well, I do see that they have a new head of security, so hopefully that's going to be taken a little bit more seriously.
Yeah, it's interesting, Vlad. I did not know that she had been given her walk orders. I know that she had completed her sale, and that was the big deal. Verizon is going to go forward with it, and that was her big crowning achievement of her whole career, was to get Yahoo sold. But other than that, she really hasn't done anything for Yahoo.
Well, I would say the pinnacle of her career has been firing or getting work-from-home employees to quit because she did not believe in the work-from-home culture that Yahoo had. And her other crowning achievement, I would say, has been reducing the price of Yahoo by to the level that AOL sold for because of its reach.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree there. Wow, I had not heard that part, so thanks for bringing that up. That's some new news for me.
Yeah, she updated her Tumblr profile, and it's up on a few stock news websites that she has resigned and got a $23 million parachute.
Wow.
Has she put her resume on LinkedIn yet?
I think with that $23 million runway, she's not in any hurry to start marketing herself for the next job. Maybe just a guess. I don't know what her expenses are, but that's what I would think.
I think she could sustain the burn for at least a few weeks without looking for a new job.
At least a few weeks.
All right. I've got one that's away from cybersecurity, and it's one that's always near to my heart because, as you guys know, I have cut the cord. So I have for my TV and stuff. I have internet access by cable, but everything else is gone. We have no landlines. We only have cell phones, and TV is strictly an antenna. So this story is off of Tech Dirt, and I wanted to note that TV cord cutting is poised to smash records during the second quarter. Things are only going to accelerate as companies like Dish, Sling TV, Sony, PlayStation, Google, YouTube, Amazon, and others flood the market with cheaper, more flexible streaming alternatives. Pay TV providers already lost roughly 789 89,000 subscribers this year. Wall Street analysts expect the second quarter to see more than 1 million. Are any of you guys cord cutters also?
I, in fact, am. I still have a landline because I have DSL. I'm not a big fan of the cable provider in my geographical location, so I went back to DSL. But I do not pay for television. I stream it all. I either download it legally or I stream it through Hulu or Netflix, or lately the biggest one that I've been getting it from is Amazon Prime. So I've cut the cord essentially. It's all cellular, but I do have that pair, that twisted pair copper for my DSL line. And unfortunately, the law that was enacted so that you could get a dry line with so that the LEC, the local exchange carrier, couldn't force dial tone on you, that expired. So I had to pay for dial tone with it.
That you'll use so often.
Wait,
right, I never.
You used to be able to line without a dial tone?
Well, you used to get it without service. Like they could just give you a dry line just for the DSL or for the service that was going on. But that expired years ago. I didn't realize that until I ordered the DSL, and they're telling me, oh, no, you have to pay for local phone service. I was like, I don't need that. I just need DSL. Oh, no, you have to have it. Went round and round and round. I looked up the regulations. I was like, oh, it expired. Thanks, FCC. Thank you.
How about you, Vlad?
So I used to be a cord cutter, and Verizon Fios actually made it cheaper for me to have their television service in addition to 100 megabit internet than to not have it.
Wow. Yeah.
So I have 100 megabits up and down, symmetric, and there's TV that the occasional flip through, only to find that there's nothing good. And you pay for Amazon Prime to actually get some semblance of useful content.
Wow. Yeah, I had Verizon Fios when I was when I first came back from overseas. I landed in Pentagon City, and I could get Verizon Fios, and it was magic. It was beautiful. I loved it. It was symmetrical both ways, and you're right. It was cheaper to get it. Excuse me. It was cheaper to get it with the television. So I ended up having the television that I rarely watched, and used the bandwidth, and it was gorgeous. It was beautiful. It was very low latency. Never went out. I was very happy with that service.
Never goes out. There must never have been any construction near you. Every time near me retrenches, they always manage to hit the Fios line.
Do they really? Oh, God, that's terrible.
Yeah, I don't know what's so magic about the Fios line, but we don't lose water, we don't lose gas, we don't lose power, but they hit that Fios line.
Wow. That's unfortunate. Well, before we go to our next break, I got a quick story, which is kind of fun, and it ties back into some of our previous shows where we're talking about privacy. You guys ready for it?
Sure.
Okay, so it starts out, and it was a tweet, but it also follows up with a study that was done, and it says, "Male friends, sorry to report that Svetlana, the underwear model, is not friending you for your wit, charm, or good looks." And this also goes not only for people in military, defense contract, and whatnot, but your everyday average citizen. You really need to look at the friend requests that you accept or the people that you're working with or associated with in social networking. They may not be what they purport to be. There's quoted as saying, Russian state actors are friending service members on Facebook while posing as attractive young women to gather intelligence, targeting the Twitter accounts of Defense Department employees with the highly customized phishing attacks. The same Russian military hacking group that breached the Democratic National Committee Fancy Bearer was also responsible for publicly posting stolen Army data online while posing as supporters of Islamic State in 2015, according to findings of another cybersecurity firm. So it's really interesting. So I just bring it up to remind people about the safety and concern and privacy with the social media information that we put out there. Don't just friend people. It doesn't make you look any better or badder. Only friend people that you know and trust, that you know that that's their actual profile. And we've seen profiles being faked that are of known people. So that was the other story I had.
All right. Well, we'll talk more about privacy when we get back. Right now, we're going to go to a break.
Yeah.
This is Rick Parr, Director of Sales and host of Talking Sports on America Matters Media. Listen up. We are looking for some good people to sell advertising with us. America Matters Media is our area's community radio network based right here in Reno and heard all over the world with excellent programming throughout the week. If you have sales experience or a great personality with positive attitude and can communicate well, call us at 775-827-8900. We'll train you on how to get the deal done. done. You'll earn money immediately on every sale you make and on every renewal. The facts are that every business needs help getting the word out about their products and services, and radio ads help them do just that by letting our listeners know where to go to get the best deals in town. We want you to help us bring our clients and listeners together with advertising sales. Call now, 775-827-8900. That's America Matters Media, 827-8900.
Call Cybersec Dental because you're worth it. They can make your smile perfect. You're gonna love your new smile. Cybersec Dental for a perfect smile. Cybersec Dental has a $125 special that includes a cleaning, x-rays, a free Sonicare toothbrush, and a free cosmetic makeover consultation. Cybersec Dental for a perfect Call 827-1113.
Hi, I'm Bill Kendall. I've practiced law in Northern Nevada for over 25 years, and I specialize in representing injured people in their fights for just compensation and in representing parents in custody and visitation disputes. I've tried over 20 jury trials to verdict. I've arbitrated or mediated hundreds of personal injury cases on behalf of clients to successful conclusions, and I have personally handled every single case from start to finish. I am also a court-appointed mediator for the Washoe County Family Court Division, where I help parents negotiate custody and visitation plans. With me as your attorney, you can rest assured that your case will be handled competently and that I will be responsive to all of your needs and questions. My goal in every case is to have clients that are satisfied with the outcome of their case and who would recommend me to others. Give me a call at 775-324-6464 or visit my website, billkendalllaw.com. My number again is 775-324-6464.
When Dad needed help getting around, I became his driver. Soon enough, it was up to me to be his housekeeper and financial manager, too. When he moved in, I became his cook and even his nurse. But no matter what roles I play, I know I'm still his daughter.
We understand the roles you play. So to help, we created aarp.org/caregiving, where you can connect with experts and other caregivers. Visit aarp.org/caregiving. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Okay, Vlad, you have the next story with us for privacy. That was the topic we were talking about before the break, so go ahead.
Continuing on with privacy, those of us that use Tor browser or Tails or whatever you use to connect to those services, a new version of Tails is out. It has quite a few new security enhancements. There's also really good sandbox optimization, so that the web browser itself does not actually know your IP address. This has huge security implications. If there's a compromise, if there's an exploit for your web browser cannot possibly leak your IP address because your IP address is not available to the web browser outside the virtual machine.
Interesting.
So I definitely recommend everyone go and update.
Okay, and what was the browser again? Tails?
Correct, Tails.
Okay. Yeah, because that's really using Tor and things like that. The devil is definitely in the details of getting your configuration right. For people who aren't as technically minded but want the privacy, what setups do you recommend?
So how far you go with the setup really depends on what it is you're doing and the goals you're trying to achieve. I would definitely recommend a separate machine just for anything Tor related. A machine that was ideally bought for cash, and a machine that's only accessed over public Wi-Fi or somewhere other than your house.
Okay.
Yeah, I gave some advice to a friend of mine who's wanting to go kind of like off the grid and so on with another cell phone and so on. And that's one of the things I told him is to have it completely separate, never turn on location services, and don't use the device at home. Only use it in remote locations and so on. And one of the biggest things that I've seen that people screw up when they try to go like darknet and go off the grid, so on, is they don't realize some of the other data that's leaking or other applications that are leaking. So a separate machine that doesn't have all that stuff installed is very important. And in particular, DNS requests leaking is a big issue.
So yes, there is something called DNS script. and that definitely should be turned on and enabled. But whether you have a Windows-based machine, an Apple or Mac-based machine, or even an Android-based device or machine, there's a lot of location services that are turned on by default, and it takes quite a bit of work and effort to go through and disable everything. Because the machine tries really hard to beacon out the second it's turned on and shove a whole bunch of information back out to the provider.
Right. What do you think about the live operating system Tails?
So that's actually what we started out with. Is there's a Tails 3.0's out. I think it's a really great effort. Anytime that you need to access something for information, or even if you're just trying to read alternative news, I am a big fan of Tails. I actually do really like. There's some plugins for Kali Linux also that I use for Tor connectivity, running on top of Android, essentially doing an alternative boot. And that seems to work pretty well.
Nice.
But again, it comes down to who your adversary is. If you do something that gets FBI interested in you and you create an entity that potentially large enough, there's very few security measures you could take that would be enough.
Okay, Vlad, I have one for you. My next story I actually want your opinion on. This is off of Ars Technica. And journals are now trying to crowdsource peer reviews. And since you just had a paper accepted at Black Hat, and so your research that has stuff subject to peer review, I wanted to know what you think about this.
Unfortunately, I think humans are very fallible. A lot of what happens during peer review is really subjective to the time of day, the mindset of the person reviewing it. I think that the outcome could be quite different if my paper was read by 5 different people 5 different times. If somebody just came back from a drive and they had got a speeding ticket, and mine was the first paper they read once they got back, they may not be very favorable to it. Whereas if somebody's having the best day of the month, or best day of their life, and then they open up their email and they're reviewing my paper, they might be more open to clicking accept.
So you really don't think whether it's peer reviewed more formally or peer reviewed kind of in a crowdsourced way really matters?
No, there's some really great studies about people submitting papers to scientific journals. They were complete gibberish that have been accepted.
Wow.
I'm trying to remember the name of the study, but I think it was somebody submitted nursery rhymes or Dr. Seuss. It was just complete utter nonsense, and it was accepted to some fairly respectable journals. So I don't really think much of peer review. I do know that the process for Black Hat and DEF CON this year was very competitive. I know some really great presentations that did not get accepted, and I see some really interesting ones that did. So I do know that the ones for DEF CON and Black Hat obviously have been read and have been scrutinized by a lot of people, and they're going to be scrutinized by thousands more in the coming weeks. At this point, almost everyone has their acceptance letter for DEF CON and Black Hat. Well, definitely for Black Hat, and I think almost all DEF CON acceptance letters have gone out with only a few exceptions. But I still think it's very subjective. I think a lot of great presentations may not have gotten accepted, and I'm waiting to see if all the ones that do make it to the main stages are worthy at the time.
All right. Andrew, go ahead.
Okay, you want me to go with the next story or comment on that?
Both.
Both. Okay. So, and I didn't want to say, Vlad had mentioned this before, is that a lot of times it can depend on the relationships that you have or your credibility out in the world like that. So if they don't know who you are and you have no credibility, they're obviously less likely to give you the thumbs up on your presentation or your proposal and so on. But if they do know you and you do have credibility out there and you do have that personal relationship with the peer reviewers, you're more likely to get some leverage or some traction there. That was my comment. And if you want, I can go to my next story.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go for it.
Okay. Russia has developed a cyber weapon that can disrupt power grids, according to new research. So I follow this Twitter, this young lady. Her name is Ellen Nakashima, and she does national security stuff in Washington, D.C. Very smart lady, and she started talking about this. And Vlad will probably have some more about this, but already used in the Ukraine, malware has been modified to target U.S. systems. So this is coming out. Some other security researchers have been talking about it and evaluated it, and it seems pretty legit. That they're starting to shift gears to target our critical infrastructure here in the United States. What do you guys think?
That doesn't surprise me at all. First of all, our infrastructure is, I don't know why they have to target it. Our infrastructure, some of it is ready to topple on its own. But it was all designed in the time before security was even even as they moved into the modern era and put in things in the infrastructure to add stuff like smart meters. There have been talks at Black Hat for several years that I know of, going back several years, showing that they really didn't consider security at all when they were considering those packets that go from the main office out to those smart meters. The packets weren't encrypted initially. Sometimes they encrypted the packet, but they didn't encrypt the addresses. I mean, there was all sorts of stuff that.
And there's an interesting statistic that came about this and some of my research about this last week is scanning the internet and looking for SCADA systems for industrial control systems. And Vlad, I wanted to get your opinion on this. They found that most of the SCADA systems that are public on the internet are unfortunately here in the United States. Only God knows why. Do you think that that's an accurate statistic, Vlad? And why?
U.S. is a more modern country. I think I do know that there's a lot of vulnerable SCADA systems on the internet in other countries. Vulnerable systems or even systems that may be fully patched but running default credentials. I mean, sometimes I spend evenings just browsing Shodan and looking for interesting things. And I would not say that there's a higher concentration of them in the United States if you look at blocks of IP addresses. I would just say that we have more systems overall. We're using more IP space, and thus we have more vulnerable systems in the United States.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because I wasn't sure. I thought it was an interesting statistic, but I wasn't quite sure how accurate it was. So that's why I wanted to get your feedback on it. But regardless, we are seeing a shift where we've seen these types of capabilities, and they attack other countries. It's happened in Estonia, Georgia, those satellite states, former satellite states of the Soviet Union, and they used it in Ukraine. Recently. And so now there's reports from different cybersecurity researchers out there that are showing that these same types of tools are being retailored to go after United States interests and our infrastructure. So that was my next story.
That story is actually, I would consider the best 2-plus-year-old story that wouldn't die. As Scott mentioned, U.S. infrastructure is very vulnerable. It was designed for interoperability, not for security.
Right.
We have known about vulnerabilities for years. The only thing that I've seen happen more recently is automation of attacks and customization of malware. Right. So we've seen Russia attack Estonia, essentially have a mini cyber war during the aggression they had against a sovereign state, while Russian troops were out robbing Estonian banks after bombing the capital. They were also attacking government services electronically.
Right. Interesting. Well, thanks for the feedback on that, Vlad. I think it's very interesting. I think the awareness needs to continue to be raised. I think even though it can be an old story and rehashed, until we start to resolve these issues and protect our critical infrastructure, we need to keep talking about this. We need to raise awareness with your average people out there and with the professionals and with our government counterparts.
All right.
I didn't want to touch smart meters because that would be a few hours in and of itself.
Excellent.
And if you're the way they're set up, neighbors could turn off their neighbors' powers in some cases.
Right.
In most cases, you can turn off somebody's power, but the funnier thing that you could actually do is you could actually turn on somebody's tamper flag, meaning they will appear as if though somebody tried to mess with their meter. I had these thoughts of if you turn on a tamper flag, somebody would actually respond. Somebody would go out there and harass my neighbors during the day and investigate. But it seems that trouble flags are ignored, or tamper flags are ignored. Even if you turn on the tamper flags for an entire neighborhood for an entire month, nobody's going to do anything about it. So that got rather boring. But if you have a HackRF or a BladeRF and an SDR, you can listen to the smart meters sending out reports and sending out updates, receiving firmware updates. You can actually intercept firmware updates that are meant for your meter and analyze them. you can watch your smart meter communicating out. Just ensure that you are only listening and not transmitting on frequencies that you shouldn't be.
Okay,
Right.
844-790-TALK. We'll take your calls after the break. Okay, it's time to thank our underwriter, Spirent Federal Systems. Their product CyberFlood from Spirent is the world's highest performing Layer 4 through 7 testing solution. Built with development teams in mind, CyberFlood has an easy-to-use interface that allows users to choose from a library of tens of thousands of realistic applications and attack vectors, including fuzzing, malware, DDoS, for unparalleled realism and scalability. It is capable of generating real traffic from anywhere in the world, allowing you to test your content-aware network applications. Visit SpirentFederal.com or call 801-785-1448 to speak to a Spirent Labs representative today to learn more about how CyberFlood can help improve the integrity of your network. All right, and we want to take your calls, 844-790-TALK, 844-790-8255. Who's got the next story, guys?
This is Vlad. I do.
Okay.
Our next story is about Uber. So it seems that Uber CEO is going to be taking a more limited role and stepping aside. This is a new development as part of the internal investigation into some of the practices that have allegedly gone on at Uber. Not necessarily tech related, but fairly interesting only because Uber, at least I consider Uber to be a technology company.
I definitely see it as a technology company, but how do you think this will affect, well, their technology moving forward, since most of the things that are being investigated are not on the technology side? At least that's my understanding.
Well, one of the big things on the technology side are their driverless cars. So right now they believe in patent review and so that's one thing. The other thing that technology related is the way they use the application, the way they use analytics. So it was both technology and so I see that as potentially changing.
Okay. You know what? I feel unaffected by the stuff with Uber only because I use their competitor Lyft. And I don't know, driverless cars I think are a lot farther away than some of the tech stuff would have us believe. I mean, we had our story last week talking about, the safety stuff in Tesla, and yet their insurance rates for Teslas are going up. And there have been some notable fails with driverless vehicles so far. And I'm not saying they won't get there. I mean, you have to go through all these growing pains. As you pointed out, look at the first aircraft. But I think we have a long way to go.
Well, one of the interesting statistics or pieces of data that I found, Vlad and I had the opportunity to brief the office of Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah, the Republican there, and we briefed them on infrastructure, cybersecurity in relation to vehicles. And the interesting piece of data that I found is that most likely full automated vehicles, self-driving vehicles, is probably going to be long-haul trucking before anything else. And so not only is it essential for the security to be in place for that, but it's on those same lines. I'm not encouraged by Uber trying to chart this and replace their drivers being fully automated. I would much rather maintain the human control in there. But for long-haul truckers and that type of service, I could see that being very beneficial, not only for safety and reliability, but also so that the drivers can get some sleep.
Yeah, it's definitely where there's more of a hazard, of the work, like in long-haul trucking, would probably be the benefit. I hadn't thought about that before. Vlad?
I actually don't have anything else to add about this story.
Oh,
but,
okay.
I do have our next story.
Okay.
The first worm that specifically targets Raspberry Pis has been released. What this piece of malware does is it scans for SSH ports that are open, and it tries the default login for Raspbian OS. Exactly. And if that login works, it installs the software that's needed to do Bitcoin mining, localizes itself, and then starts scanning the internet. Raspberry Pi is a rather inefficient way to mine Bitcoins, but it is pretty interesting. It's yet another example of insecure IoT and default credentials.
More default credentials, and yeah, absolutely. It's not very efficient, but multiply that by, let's say, 20,000 Raspberry Pis, you might get some Bitcoin out of that.
I don't think there's very many Raspberry Pis that are exposed to the internet, but once you get into the inside of some of the networks, especially some of the college campuses, some of the research institutions, I think there might easily be tens of thousands of them.
Wow.
Definitely agree.
Well, as long as we're talking about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, Vlad, Andrew, what is going on with cryptocurrency valuations? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I think it's all black magic. No, I've invested a little bit in it more as a hobby. I used to be a Bitcoin miner when it was actually profitable. And I did a little bit as a hobby when I came back from overseas, just because I wasn't paying for electricity and cooling, so I was using those USB ASIC miners and so on, so to churn out. You can't solo mine anymore. The difficulty level is way too high for Bitcoin, but using some of the pools, you can actually do some efficient mining with the right hardware and whatnot. But as far as the evaluations, God, I don't know how they do that. I think it's black magic. I really think so. When I watch the tickers and the price fluctuate up and down, obviously they're gauging that based on how many buys versus sells and whatnot. But I don't really feel that there's any solid math behind that. What do you think, Vlad?
I think that actually shows people distrust in government currency. If you look at gold prices have shot up recently. So has the price of cryptocurrency. People don't trust the euro. People don't necessarily want to invest as heavily in U.S. dollars as they used to. So this is the new magic currency.
Do you think that's a logical, even if assuming your explanation is correct? I would still say that's kind of illogical behavior by the market, because at least you have the full faith and credit of the federal government standing behind the dollar, and you have the European Union standing behind the euro. What do you have standing behind Bitcoin?
Well, that's why I only use Coinbase, because I think it's the only exchange that is actually FDIC insured. It's an actual bank that's backed. So that's why I use Coinbase.
So my thoughts on that is the governments have defaulted in the past, but cryptocurrency is backed by math. I mean, what do you trust more, a government or math? And gold has been a universal standard for tens of thousands of years. How can you go wrong with that? It's outlasted every empire.
Right. So an interesting fact that I learned, a friend of mine that's on 2600net, he works for the company Purse.io, which is promoting and pushing Bitcoin. And he pointed out something to me, though, which I didn't quite realize, is that there's only going to be ever 21 million Bitcoins ever mined. After that, that's it. There's a limited supply. So after that, we're just going to be trading fractions of those 21 million Bitcoins. And the more people that put into it, put actual currency into it and trade with it and buy with it, the value is just going to continue to go up. So think about that. As long as the infrastructure doesn't break down and it completely breaks, the math will be sound. The 21 million Bitcoins that will eventually get mined and completed will all be traded in fractions or percentages thereof.
So that's mostly true. What it's going to mean is we're going to have another split like we had in the past.
Right.
So
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, and things will continue on down the road, but it will just require a split and then for the transaction records to be consolidated.
Right. Yeah, the friend that I know that works there, he did talk about the split and the politics behind it and some of the technical issues behind it, and it was really illuminating or enlightening for me. I didn't quite realize some of the mechanics of how the Bitcoin network works. Even though I've been a miner and I've used it, I think I've got like $500 in Bitcoin, and it's shot up over the last month or two to some pretty interesting pricing. But went up to 3,000, and now they're back down to 2,500, I think, as of yesterday.
Sell.
Yeah, I think most people who have Bitcoin or use Bitcoin do not understand the ledger or how it works.
Right.
So yeah, at times that does get very political.
All right, I have the next story, and this is for my segment about don't live under a rock. This is urgent news that everyone should be aware of for next week, and that is that a KFC chicken sandwich is heading to the stratosphere. Have you guys heard about this story?
No, I haven't. 1 minute.
All right. So, okay. So basically, there's a company called Stratolite Balloon System, and it's scheduled to carry a KFC Zinger chicken sandwich into the stratosphere on June 21st. Representatives of both companies announced. For KFC, the PR value is obvious. For Stratolite, though, what's going on is this will be the first mission. They have a whole system of sending things into the stratosphere, but this will be the longest ever controlled stratospheric balloon voyage with a commercial payload, and the mission offers edge of space access to KFC. So you can watch it on space.com and see the story there. So I encourage everyone to, it's the closest thing we're going to.
I'll be watching that. Very good, Scott.